Picture this. It is 3:17 a.m. on a fog-covered rural road in Mexico. A single truck cuts through the oppressive darkness. Its cargo, a staggering $6 million in cartel cash, destined for a sophisticated money laundering operation across the border, in exactly 14 minutes. A man you have never heard of, a man invisible to the world, will execute what he believes is the most perfect heist in cartel history. He will steal every last dollar, vanish without a trace, and expertly frame 4 innocent men for his audacious crime. But here is what makes this story truly chilling. Truly unlike any cybercrime documentary you have seen before. The cartel will never know they were robbed by their own janitor. They will torture and murder the wrong people. Destroy innocent families. All while never suspecting that the man who cleaned their blood off the floors was the very same man who stole their millions. This is the true story of the perfect crime and the terrible price of perfection. How far would you go to escape the suffocating grip of poverty? And what happens when the perfect plan has the most imperfect, devastating consequences? I am the Digital Sleuth. And today we are diving deep into an internet mystery that twists through the physical world and the digital shadows. We are revealing the incredible lengths one man went to for freedom, and the technological vulnerabilities he exploited to achieve it. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper. 2 years before that foggy night, Luis Alvarez was nobody. Literally nobody. At 34 years old, he was the kind of person society had trained itself not to see. He was a janitor in a cartel-controlled territory, earning a pittance of roughly $11 a day to clean the very offices where millions of dollars changed hands every single week. For 18 months, Luis worked for the Hermanos Negros cartel, mopping floors, emptying trash, and fixing broken equipment. To the cartel members, he was furniture. Invisible, forgettable. But furniture, as it turns out, has eyes. And furniture has ears. During his first year, Luis absorbed everything. While cleaning the boss's office, he would overhear phone conversations about massive money transfers, often referencing the intricate web of shell corporations and offshore accounts that are the hallmark of sophisticated financial fraud. While fixing air conditioning units, he would listen intently to logistics meetings, absorbing details about routes, schedules, and security procedures. He became a passive participant in a live-action cybercrime documentary, observing the inner workings of a criminal enterprise. The conversation that truly changed his life happened on a Tuesday in October. Luis was cleaning the windows in the main conference room when he overheard the operations manager discussing a recurring problem. Their Tuesday night cash runs through Campo Nuevo were completely unguarded. Clean operations, minimal security, but with a deadly catch. Drivers kept disappearing. Some were killed by rivals, others by their own paranoia. A few simply vanished into the night with the money. The manager actually laughed as he explained their chilling solution. Pay drivers $500 per run, but simply expect them to be dead within 3 trips. It was apparently cheaper than hiring dedicated security. Luis continued cleaning, his expression never betraying the storm brewing within. But inside, his mind was calculating. $6 million every Tuesday. Minimal security. Expendable drivers. What if the next driver simply disappeared? Differently. But Luis was not a criminal. He was a janitor with a 6th grade education who had never stolen anything larger than office supplies. How could someone like him possibly rob a cartel? The answer came 8 months later when fate, or perhaps a stroke of pure unadulterated luck, handed him the key to everything. In June of the following year, one of the cartel's technical specialists called in sick during a critical system upgrade. The surveillance equipment was malfunctioning, and they needed someone, anyone, who understood basic electronics. Someone pointed to Luis, because the janitor had fixed their Wi-Fi before. Luis nodded quietly. He had taught himself computer repair from YouTube videos during his spare time, practicing on discarded equipment. It was a hobby, nothing more. But as he worked on the surveillance system, Luis realized he had been handed something far more valuable than money. He had been given access. The cartel's entire digital infrastructure ran through a central server. Cameras, GPS tracking, communication logs, and financial records. Everything was connected. And now, Luis, the invisible janitor, had administrative access to all of it. For the next 6 months, Luis became the cartel's unofficial IT support. Every technical problem, every camera malfunction, every network issue, they called the janitor. He was reliable, quiet, and completely invisible. What they did not know was that Luis was meticulously documenting everything. Every password, every system vulnerability, and every piece of digital evidence that flowed through their network. He was in essence conducting his own internal audit, mapping out their entire digital footprint. He learned about money pickup schedules 3 weeks in advance. He knew which routes had security and which did not. And he could access real-time GPS data from every vehicle in their fleet. Most importantly, he learned how to manipulate their surveillance system. He knew how to loop camera feeds to create false continuity, how to insert false timestamps into logs, and how to make digital evidence show whatever he wanted it to show. This is not just a physical heist. It is a deep dive into the kind of digital forensics and evidence manipulation we often see in major phishing attacks or financial fraud cases. Luis was no longer just a janitor. He was a digital ghost, moving invisibly through their electronic systems, learning their secrets, and preparing for something they could never imagine. But knowledge without action is worthless. Luis needed more than access. He needed a plan. And that plan began taking shape in his small, dark room under the lonely light of a single lamp. What followed were 18 months of meticulous preparation that would have impressed military strategists and terrified psychiatrists. If you could have seen Luis's apartment in December of that year, you would have thought you had walked into the mind of a madman or a genius. Every wall was covered with maps, schedules, photographs, and flowcharts. Red string connected dates to locations, routes to personnel, and patterns to opportunities. It looked like the workspace of a detective hunting a serial killer, not a janitor planning a robbery. The turning point, the spark that ignited the second darker phase of his plan, came when Luis was cleaning a loading bay late one night. A bucket slipped from a ledge. 40 pounds of metal and water smashed down across his right hand. The pain was instant, sharp, numbing, hot. The next morning, the cartel sent him to a cheap private clinic on the edge of town. They did not want him missing shifts. He sat there, cradling his hand, waiting for a doctor who was running 40 minutes behind schedule. The television in the lobby was old, flickering, mounted high on the wall. It was showing a documentary rerun about the 1,978 Lufthansa heist at JFK Airport, where over $5 million in cash was stolen and never recovered. Luis was not paying attention at first. But then came a line that echoed in his mind, changing everything. In every great heist, the real genius is not the one who steals the money. It is the one smart enough to make someone else take the fall. Luis looked up. The documentary explained how the real masterminds never got caught, how they let the foot soldiers rot in prison or disappear. They did not just steal. They erased themselves from the story. That night, Luis could not sleep. He replayed that phrase over and over. Make someone else take the fall. It was not about the money anymore. It was about after the money. About who would be blamed. By dawn, he had a new plan. One more dangerous and more brilliant than anything he had imagined before. He opened a clean page in his notebook and wrote 2 words. Scapegoat. Redirection. The robbery would happen, but someone else would pay for it. This level of misdirection is a common thread in many complex financial fraud schemes. Identity theft, creating false trails, and manipulating digital records are all tools used to obfuscate the real perpetrator. Luis, without formal training, was intuiting the mechanics of a deep-seated internet mystery. The next few weeks were obsessive. He stole personnel files one by one and spread them out on his bed. He took notes in a stolen ledger, assigning threat scores, psychological traits, and personal risks. He was not looking for flaws. He was looking for stories. Carlos Vega, Mario Guerrero, Fernando Silva, Ricardo Morales, and finally, Gustavo Herrera. Luis meticulously gathered small, seemingly insignificant details. A secret affair, a gambling debt, a suspicious curiosity, and an obsessive adherence to rules. He was not inventing lies. He was finding the cracks in their lives and preparing to exploit them. He was acting much like a dark web scammer who exploits vulnerabilities in human psychology rather than just software. But the heist was only half the plan. The real part, the one that truly mattered, was ensuring Luis Alvarez died that night too. Quietly, without a trace. How does a janitor vanish? He had no access to hackers or corrupt officials. No one owed him favors. And he was not a smuggler with resources. He was just the guy who mopped the floors. Then, by accident, he heard something. 2 men were talking at a table behind him in a dusty cantina. Low voices. Careful words. One of them mentioned documents. Clean scans. Multiple IDs. And a name that stuck. El Artista. The artist. Luis did not turn around. He did not breathe. He just listened and memorized the details. This was his entry point into the shadowy world of forged identities. A crucial component of many dark web scams where anonymity is currency. A week later, in the back of a shuttered auto shop on the outskirts of Mexico City, he met the man behind the name. El Artista did not ask who Luis was or why he needed to disappear. He simply got to work. His movements were clean and practiced. Part craftsman and part surgeon. Luis explained what he needed. A life that had never worked for the cartel, never lived in Reynosa, and had just enough digital noise to seem boring and real. For 15,000 pesos, quietly siphoned over months from inflated janitorial invoices, he got it. Name, Ricardo Salinas. Origin: a town in Tamaulipas where the municipal archives had conveniently burned down in 2017. Background: school records from a closed high school, and job history from a now-defunct trucking company. Digital noise: 2 parking violations, a small unpaid loan, and a gas bill, just enough to show up on second-rate databases. This is the art of digital camouflage. Something cybersecurity protocols often struggle to detect without advanced behavioral analytics. 2 weeks later, Luis held a fresh Mexican passport and a valid U.S. driver's license, both under his new identity. He also received a USB stick filled with PDFs, scanned records, ID card backups, and certificates. He stared at them that night under a flickering bulb in his apartment. The heist had not happened yet, but the man who would pull it off already did not exist. Let us go back to the day Luis read Gustavo's medical file. He was not looking for weakness. He was looking for a story he could weaponize. And there it was. A quiet sentence tucked away at the bottom. Medical leave. Chronic anxiety. Prescription: Zolpam. Luis stopped reading. His thoughts froze. Not from confusion, but from chilling clarity. Sedatives. That changed everything. It meant Gustavo was already living under chemical control. He did not need to be scared, threatened, or bribed. He just needed to be put to sleep. Luis stared at the file for over an hour that night. As the idea settled into his mind, it no longer felt like a detail. It felt like the plan. But theory was not enough. Luis needed a way to do it silently, quickly, without leaving a mark. This would be a non-traceable, non-digital attack on a human target. He started digging. First, he called his cousin, a veterinary assistant outside Monterrey. He pretended to be writing a screenplay, asking questions about animal surgeries. What kind of gas do you use to sedate dogs? Is it fast? Does it smell? Could a person even notice it? The cousin answered without hesitation. Isoflurane works every time. Luis wrote the word down and circled it 3 times. This seemingly innocuous research is how many real-world poisonings or sophisticated attacks begin. By leveraging accessible knowledge from unexpected sources. That night, he stayed up reading veterinary textbooks and biology PDFs. He did not just want the name. He wanted control. He learned that isoflurane was a colorless, non-flammable gas used in surgeries. In low concentrations, it was nearly odorless. It worked fast. It wore off cleanly. But most importantly, it could be administered through a vehicle's ventilation system. Perfect. But he still needed to test it. Luis started showing up at his cousin's clinic unannounced, offering to help clean cages or organize supplies. Each visit gave him another excuse to observe procedures, take notes, and even sneak supplies. After 2 weeks, he had a full sketch of how the gas worked. But sketches were not enough. He rented an abandoned warehouse outside town. No cameras. No neighbors. And there he began to test it, not on people. Not yet. On animals. At first, it was rats. He would put them in sealed containers and monitor how long they stayed awake. Then came cats. Then dogs. It was not science. It was rehearsal. Each time an animal collapsed, Luis did not flinch. He took notes, adjusted the concentration, watched and waited. Each test made the next easier. He was not just studying chemistry. He was studying himself. He was crossing ethical lines. A chilling psychological descent that often accompanies perpetrators in major financial fraud schemes. He learned that 3% isoflurane fed through a vehicle's AC system would knock out an adult male in about 90 seconds. He also built a small delivery device, no larger than a phone, matte black, and controlled remotely. He tested it in trucks from a junkyard, tweaking airflow, timing, and remote range. By the end of the third week, Luis had a working system, a gas that could sedate, a machine that could deliver, and a conscience that no longer objected. By the time Luis finished his last animal test, the blueprint was final. There was no more doubt, no more sketches, no more trial and error. Everything was ready. He knew exactly where he would intercept Gustavo's truck. A blind curve near Campo Nuevo, where even cartel spotters went off duty for coffee. He knew when. 3:03 a.m. on the next scheduled Tuesday run. Same route. Same driver. No security escort. He knew how. 3% isoflurane through the AC vent. Gustavo would fall asleep before he even realized something was wrong. But taking out the driver was only half the job. Luis needed to move the money quietly and quickly. That meant no helicopters, no convoys, no drama. Just extraction. In a rundown shed 20 minutes off route. He had hidden the next phase. A 1,994 Nissan Suru. Sun-bleached and battered. The kind of car people look through. Not at. Rear seats ripped out. Suspension reinforced. And license plates stolen from a matching junk model 2 states away. He had test-driven it twice with full weight in the trunk. 12 waterproof duffel bags of cartel cash would fit. Barely. From there, the road south would be clean. Luis had picked every turn, every gas station, and every blind spot. No surveillance. No digital footprint. No one who would remember the face of a quiet man driving a forgettable car. And then, not a checkpoint. Not a tunnel. Something smarter and quieter. Luis had considered the smuggling tunnel months ago. But that plan had holes. Heat signatures. Cartel lookouts. Collapsible ground. Too risky. Instead, he chose a different route. The one few dared. The smuggler's corridor near Camargo. 8 kilometers of thick brush. Unpatrolled and fog-covered. Leading straight to a forgotten ranch road in Texas. He had mapped it 24 times on foot. Buried markers. Timed the walk. And counted how long Border Patrol drones took to loop back. It was quiet. Too quiet. The plan was in motion. The tools were ready. The story was perfect. Now all he had to do was press start. Luis Alvarez stood alone on the edge of the highway. Shrouded in fog and darkness, just beyond the bend near Campo Nuevo. His backpack was zipped. Gloves on. And a fake cartel uniform clung to his frame. 2 years of planning had led to this moment. In less than an hour, he would either be a ghost with $2 million, or a corpse with a story no one would hear. But the setup had begun weeks earlier. 2 weeks before the heist, Luis started building what looked like an official cartel checkpoint. He bought 4 red traffic cones, an old LED floodlight, and a collapsible stop sign painted in Spanish. He added a flashing strobe light meant to mimic Cartel emergency beacons. All of it cheap. All of it believable. Especially in the dark. He knew the exact spot where he would stage it. A narrow gravel shoulder near a bend in the road where GPS signals often dropped. Cartel drivers were accustomed to random inspections. So these surprise checkpoints did not raise suspicion anymore. If anything, drivers were conditioned to comply without asking questions. Luis had chosen this place for a reason. No cameras. No overhead lights. No witnesses. At 2:52 a.m., Luis arrived and began setting it all up. The cones went down first, forming a crooked lane across the road. The fake warning sign leaned against a metal post. He mounted the strobe light on the roof of a parked maintenance truck he had borrowed. A dim lantern hung from a hook behind him, casting just enough light to create authority, but not enough to expose him. Then he waited. 2:58 a.m. Luis reached into his coat and pulled out a small black remote. It was a repurposed diagnostic tool he had quietly stolen months earlier when they let him into the server room. At home, Luis had rewired the device himself. Step by step, now it pulsed once in his palm. The GPS feed on Gustavo's truck froze instantly. A digital illusion of a routine 6-minute smoke break. Nothing strange. No alarms. Just another blip on a route where signals often cut out anyway. No one would question it. And that was the brilliance. He was exploiting known network weaknesses to create a digital dead zone. 3:03 a.m. Headlights cut through the mist. The truck appeared, slowing naturally at the sight of the cones and the flashing light. Luis stepped forward, clipboard in hand, radio clipped to his shoulder. His uniform was spotless, his posture confident. He did not wave or shout. He just stood firm like someone whose authority did not need explaining. Routine checkpoint, he said in a calm, practiced voice. Gustavo did not question it. These checks happened and everyone knew that. He nodded, blurry-eyed, and put the truck in neutral. Luis circled to the front, opened the AC intake, and quietly attached the black sedation device. He tapped the trigger in his coat pocket and began the countdown. 90 seconds. Just fog. Silence. And the sound of the engine. At 3:05 a.m., Gustavo Herrera slumped unconscious against the window. Luis moved fast. He pulled the unconscious driver into the passenger seat, climbed behind the wheel, and drove into the darkness. 10 minutes later, he arrived at a crumbling farmhouse, barely visible from the highway. Hidden behind the house under a sheet of rusted tin was the compact gray sedan, dusty and stripped of identifying details. The trunk was already open. The money? 12 waterproof plastic containers filled with $2 million in cartel cash was stacked in the rear of the transport truck. Luis moved with mechanical precision, hauling them out one by one and loading them into the sedan. 8 minutes and 17 seconds. That is all it took. Luis returned to the truck and began planting evidence. A confession letter forged in Mario Guerrero's handwriting, creased and yellowed. Bank records linking Carlos Vega to suspicious offshore deposits. A burner phone containing dozens of fake text messages between co-conspirators, business cards with Fernando Silva's fingerprints, and a maintenance checklist initialed by Ricardo Morales. It was nothing by itself. But in a cartel investigation, proximity was guilt. The subtle art of digital and physical misdirection was complete. Then came the final touch. Luis leaned over Gustavo's unconscious body and delivered a sharp blow to his nose with the side of his fist. Cartilage cracked. Blood poured. He smeared it deliberately across the steering wheel. A perfect trace of violence. The narrative was simple. This was a multi-man, inside job, orchestrated by rival cartels and rogue drivers. And Gustavo was just a survivor in the middle of a bloody betrayal. At 316 a.m., Luis repositioned Gustavo in the driver's seat. Reattached the GPS. Removed the gas device. And disappeared into the night. At 318 a.m., Gustavo jolted awake. No memory. No money. No idea what had happened. By 6:30 a.m., the cartel's operations center was in chaos. Gustavo had arrived 2 hours late, dazed with no memory. The truck was empty except for the story Luis had planted. At first, they thought Gustavo had double-crossed them, but the evidence told a different story. One, the cartel found far more convincing. This was not a robbery. This was a conspiracy. Their internal task force got to work. Former military intelligence and ex-federal agents trained to break men in hours. Luis had given them everything they needed to believe the lie. The documents traced suspicious wire transfers to Carlos Vega. The phone showed encrypted chats between Fernando Silva and rival cartel numbers. Within 48 hours, the cartel had issued death orders for all 4 men. Carlos Vega was found first. Shot dead at dawn. His only crime was falling in love with the wrong woman. Fernando Silva fled with his wife and 2 children to Guatemala. But the cartel found them anyway and executed the entire family. Ricardo Morales was captured at the U.S. border. 3 days of torture followed. He broke after 18 hours, confessing to crimes he had never committed. But in his final moments, he whispered, "The janitor." Always watching, the leader of the cartel began to wonder if they had been looking in the wrong places. Meanwhile, Mario Guerrero was gunned down in a casino 2 nights after the heist. 3 bullets to the chest. No warning. No words. 7 people died for Luis's crime. 4 drivers. 1 teacher. And 2 children. All innocent. And all murdered based on evidence Luis had fabricated. Meanwhile, the real perpetrator had vanished completely. At 4:42 a.m., Luis Alvarez reached the edge of the border zone. A dense stretch of forest facing the Rio Grande. Luis shut off the engine of his dusty Nissan, rolled it off the path, and buried it under camouflage netting. He grabbed 2 bags, slung them over his shoulders, and began walking 8 kilometers through the trees. He used one of the same footpaths smugglers had used for years. No cameras. No drones. No witnesses. 2 hours later, he reached a crumbling ranch shack he had quietly rented under a false name. He locked the 2 bags inside, drank half a bottle of water, and turned back. Before dawn, he crossed the border again to retrieve the rest. By the time the sun rose, 4 bags were hidden safely in his makeshift hideout. Luis Alvarez achieved his perfect crime. Fueled by desperation and an almost superhuman dedication to detail, he exploited both human nature and technological blind spots. but the price of his perfection was horrific. 7 innocent lives lost. Families shattered. All because one man became invisible and understood how to weaponize information. This story highlights a crucial truth. Vulnerabilities exist everywhere. Not just in code, but in human systems. So, what can we learn from Luis's chillingly effective methods? How can we protect ourselves from those who operate in the shadows? First, understand the power of digital footprints. Cybercriminals scour online profiles for vulnerabilities to launch phishing attacks or identity theft. Be mindful of your digital trail and use strong, unique passwords for every account. Second, recognize the exploitation of human weakness through social engineering. Luis did not hack minds. He observed existing flaws. Be skeptical of unsolicited messages, even from trusted sources, and never click on suspicious links. Third, be aware of the manipulation of digital evidence. Attackers can plant fake evidence or alter logs to cover their tracks. Robust cybersecurity protocols like multi-factor authentication and regular security audits are non-negotiable for any serious organization. Fourth, emphasize data security and access control. Luis gained administrative access because of a single point of failure. Implement strict access policies based on the principle of least privilege, so employees only see what they absolutely need. Finally, do not underestimate the danger of untrained personnel. The cartel treated Luis as furniture, and that was their biggest mistake. Educate staff on the latest phishing techniques and social engineering tactics. Luis Alvarez's story is a stark reminder that the greatest threats often come from where you least expect them. It is a compelling and tragic narrative that shows us the chilling intersection of human ingenuity and desperation. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. And most importantly, stay secure. I am the Digital Sleuth, and I will see you in the next investigation.